the reason I think that many people don't know what's coming is that the Albanese government deliberately refuses to say how this voice would work. People assume it'll be harmless and nice, and the polls show extremely strong support for the voice. It could well get up. But you have done very interesting polling of your own. Tell us what it shows.
I will, Andrew, and thanks for having me on the program. As you say, what we need is a debate on something as far-reaching as a voice to Parliament. But the Albanese government, as well as not releasing any detail, is determined not to have a debate. There's essentially been a disinformation campaign that essentially says that it's racist to question the voice to Parliament, indeed to oppose it. And you've given some great examples there. So what we wanted to do was find out what mainstream Australians actually thought of that. And so we commissioned independent research and we surveyed 1,000 Australians and we asked them what they thought of this proposition that is it racist to oppose the voice to Parliament? And Andrew, isn't it interesting that 50% of Australians said no, it isn't. Whatever their views on the voice, they're very open and interested in having a proper debate and they see that it's not automatically racist. And other questions that we asked in the survey also showed that this idea that there's an overwhelming majority of Australians who are in support of the voice to Parliament is also not correct.
Yeah, I was intrigued by that because...
You go, Andrew.
What you put, let me just read out the question, because what you put was a much more accurate description of what this voice would be. You asked, the question would be, there should be a separate entity in the federal parliament solely comprised of Indigenous Australians to advise on all laws for every Australian. And that's exactly what it's going to have the power to do. And the results, Scott, were quite interesting. It's not an overwhelming yes vote for that proposition after all. What did you find?
Well, that's right. And I think what we see in the other so-called surveys which purport to show that overwhelming majority is they reveal the goodwill that Australians have towards Indigenous Australians. Mainstream Australians, everybody wants better life outcomes for Indigenous Australians and an improvement in the social indicators. And so when asked generic questions about recognition or for some vague thing called a voice to Parliament, often you would get a very positive response. But as you say, we asked a very specific question along those lines, and only 38% agreed that that was something they wanted. 34% disagreed. And interestingly enough, there's also a large proportion of Australians who neither said yes nor no, and I suspect don't know very much about it, precisely because the Albanese government is determined not to provide that detail.
I think this is so interesting, and now we know exactly why it doesn't want to, Scott. No, exactly, it doesn't want to provide the detail because the more you know, the less you're inclined to vote for it. So I suspect there's going to be a great big silence if it can get away with it. Scott Hargreaves, thank you so much indeed for putting that right on the agenda. You need to know about it because the more you know, the less you will like it. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it, Scott.